It was 10 minutes before they heard the screaming. It was an unearthly sound that twisted the stomach into knots of fear and turned the blood cold. Involuntarily, the Brandon and Sir Rodney reined in as they heard it. Their horses plunged wildly against the reins. It came from straight ahead of them, and rose and fell until the earth quaked with horror of it. "Good God in heaven!" the Brandon exclaimed. "What is that?" "It's the Karanga," Will said. "They're hunting." Welcome, guys. Dip here, and today I'm reading Ranger's Apprentice by John Flanagan. It's a pretty good book. It's one of my favorites, and it is The Runes of Gorlan. If I said that. So, let's begin. Okay. Prologue. Mathagra, Lord of the Mountains of Rain and Night, former Brandon of Gorlan in the kingdom of Roland, looked out over his bleak, rain-swept domain, and for perhaps 1,000th time he cursed. This was all that was left to him now, a jumble of rugged granite cliffs, tumblers, boulders, and icy mountains, of sheer gorge and steep narrow passes of gravel and rock, with never a tree or a sign of green to break the momentary. Even though it had been 15 years since he had been driven back into his forbidden realm that has become his prison, he could still remember the pleasant green glades and thickly forest hills of his former fifth. The streams filled with fish, and the fields rich with crops and game. Gorland had been a beautiful living place. The mountains of Rain and Night were dead and desolate. A platoon of wargulls were drilling in the castle yard below him. Mathagra watched them for a few seconds, listening to the grunting, ventral rhythmic chant that accompanied all of their movements. They were stocky, misshapen beings with features that were halfway human, but with a long, brutish muzzle and fangs like a bear or a large dog. Avoiding all contact with humans, the wargulls had lived and breeded in these remote mountains since ancient times. No one in living memory had ever set eyes upon one, but rumors and legends has persisted of a savage tribe of semi-intelligent beasts in the mountains. Mathagra, planning a revolt against the kingdom of Roland, had left Gorlan, fief to seek them out. If such creatures existed, they would give him an edge in the war that was to come. It took him months, but he eventually found them. Aside from their wordless chants, wargulls had no spoken language, relying on their primitive form of thought awareness for communication. But their minds were simple and intellect basic. As a result, they had been a totally subsided to domain by superior intelligence and willpower. Mathagra bent them to his will, and they became a perfect army for him, ugly beyond nightmares, utterly pitiless, and bound totally to his mental orders. Now look at them, he remembered. The brightly dressed knights in glittering armor who used to compete in the tournaments at Castle Gorlan. Their silk-gowned ladies cheered them on and applauding their skill, mentally comparing them to these black-furred, misshapen creatures. He cursed again. The wargulls, attuned to his thoughts, sensing his disturbance, and stirred uncomfortably, pausing in what they were doing. Angrily, he directed them back to their drill, and the chanting resumed. Mathagra moved away from the unglazing window, close to the fire that seemed utterly incapacitated of dispelling the lamp and chill from this gloomy castle. 15 years, he thought to himself again. 15 years since he had rebelled against the newly crowned King Dukin. A youth in his 20s, he had planned it all carefully as the old king's sickness progressed. banking on the incisions and confusion that would follow his death to split the Brandons and give Mithraga his opportunity to seize the throne. Secretly, he had trained his army of wargals, massing them up here in the mountains, ready for the moment to strike. Then, in the days of confusion and grief following the king's death, when the Brandons traveled to Castle Ruined for their funeral rituals, leaving their armies leaderless, he attacked, overrunning the southeastern quarter of the kingdom in a matter of days, routing then confusing the leaderless forces that tried to oppose him. Dukan, young and experienced, could never have stood against him. The kingdom was for his taking. The throne was his for the asking. Then Lord Nutholt, of old King Supreme Army commander, he had relayed some of the younger Brandons into a loyal confirmation, giving strength to Dukan's resolve and stiffening the wavering courage of the others. Armies had met at Hackham Heath, close by the Slip Under River, and the battle swayed in the balance for 5 hours, with attack and counterattack, and massive loss of life. The Slips Under was a shallow river, but it was treacherous. Reaches of quicksand and soft mud had formed at the impassable barrier, protecting Mithraga's right flank. But then one of those gray-cloaked meddlers, known as Rangers, led a force of heavy cavalry across a secret fraud 10 kilometers upstream. The armored horsemen appeared at the critical moment of the battle and fell upon the rear of Mithraga's army. The wargals trained in the tumble rocks of the mountain had one weakness. They feared horses, and could never stand against such a surprise cavalry attack. They broke, retreating to the narrow confines of the three-step pass, and back to the mountains of rain and night. Mithraga had defeated. His rebellion defeated went with him, and here he had been exceeding these 15 years, waiting, plotting, and hating the men who had done this to him. Now he thought it was time for revenge. His spies told him the kingdom had grown slack, and commonplace the presence here was all but forgotten. The name Mithraga was a name of legend nowadays, a name mother used to hush fraction children, threatening that if they did not behave, the Black Lord Mithraga would come for him. The time was ripe. Once again, he led his wargals into an attack. But this time, he would have allies, and this time, he would sow the ground with uncertainty and confusion beforehand. This time, none of those who conspired against him previously would be left alive to aid the king. King Dukan. For the wargals had not the only ancient terrifying creatures he had found in these somber mountains. He had 2 other allies, even more fearsome and dreadful beasts, known as the Cathandra. The time was ripe to unleash them. Well, that's the prologue. Well, guys, continue, and I'll see you at chapter 1. Tell me in the comments down below what you think is going to happen. And if you want to, after this book, if you want to hear the second. Well, thank you guys. Subscribe and like. Tip out.